All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another round of Doc Talks with Dr. Zach Couples.
Dr. Boot.
Dr. Logan Ponce.
Boom. And we're here to talk about shin splints. We get it. It's getting nice out. You've been running and your shin's hurting. What do? We're going to help you problem solve through that today. What are the three keys, folks, that you need to reduce your shin splints when you go to run or do something wild and crazy? First one.
Load management. So we need to understand how much we're actually putting into our feet, ankles, hips, back, if that ever gets achy, but we're mainly looking at shins, but load management into those areas. That's going to be something that's really key. So we're going to look at frequency, duration, surface, and intensity. What about those can change? What can we monitor with those things?
Frequency and duration is pretty easy. You can adjust by how far you're going, but you also always remember that it's all about progressive overload. So if you're just now getting back into training, you probably want to keep it very short, something within a mile or maybe even less than that, but everyone's different. But progressively starting a couple days a week, short distances, then see how you feel. If that feels okay and you're not completely wrecked, then you can bump up an extra day of training, maybe go a little bit further. Just give the body time to adapt. You need that tissue to adapt and get more dense.
So you don't crush it 4 days in a row just because you can?
Not initially.
Okay, cool.
Unless you're in shape for it.
Yeah.
Just like if you wanted to run a marathon, you don't start with the marathon on your first running day, especially if you have no experience running, because your tissues have to adapt. So you want to make sure you go with a slow progression. A good rule of thumb that has some research backing it is a 10% increase in total workload, which if you want to know where your workload is, take the time or distance that you run, multiply that by how hard it is on a 1 to 10 scale, and whatever number you get, you can use that as your 10% increase. So that gives you the option to either increase how long you go or increase how hard you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's frequency, duration. Intensity is also another thing that we've looked at. So as a practitioner, we say, if you ran for 10 minutes, whether it's a flat surface or maybe an incline, those are big differences in stresses. So we want to make sure that we're monitoring that stuff too. So if we got someone that's going up and down on hills, and every time they take a step downwards, they have more like impact forces into their feet, into their shins. That's something that we can monitor, and we can say, hey, pull back on some of that stuff, maybe just go flat. And that's something to kind of monitor and change for our load management section of this. So we got frequency, duration, and intensity, meaning like how hard the run is, and then also surface. If you're someone that might be sensitive to your shins. You've had shin splints in the past. It might be better to run on a grass surface, run on a surface that has a little bit more give to it, and then start building up your tolerance maybe onto a softer sand track or rubber track or things like that before you progress into concretes and asphalts and stuff like that.
Yeah, or even if you're doing trail running, anytime you have a change in the surface, the muscles in your body are working differently and loaded a bit differently. Not just the muscles, but all tissues. So miles on concrete aren't always equal to miles on trail, which aren't always equal to miles on sand or another type of surface. So apply the same rules that we discussed with frequency, duration, intensity, and make it surface specific as well.
Cool. Anything else on that one, guys? Cool. All right, so footwear is another one. Dr. Couples is going to grab a sweet little demo for us to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about 3 areas of your shoe to consider. First being the heel.
So with shoe wear, there's oftentimes a big push to either you need to go more barefoot, you need to go with minimalist shoes, and there's a reason why Vibram got a class action lawsuit, and that's because a lot of people didn't follow the load management piece that we discussed, one, when utilizing these shoes, but two, you have to think about it this way. When we were cavemen and women, we weren't going barefoot on concrete back then because concrete didn't exist. So we have different surfaces that we have to deal with now. And that's why we think that having a supportive shoe is incredibly important when you're going into running. The 3 keys you want to look for with a shoe. Step 1, you should have a stable heel counter. So the heel should be pretty stiff as you press it down. You see, I'm pushing really hard and it's not moving. Versus my lovely Wolf and Shepherd shoe, I can flatten that, easy peasy, not a good running shoe, even though I would look super fly. So that's the shoe. On the toe side, this should be flexible as you move up and walk, unless you have a very stiff big toe. You'll know what it is, what you're talking about. You might have a bunion, or perhaps you have a hallux rigidus or a fusion. This would not be good. A shoe like a Hoka is generally a little bit better choice, where your foot kind of moves as one piece. I believe this one has a flexible big toe, so it does pass that test. The third thing that you want with your shoe is the arch should be pretty stiff and stable like that. I got a little bit of bend, but that's because these shoes are a little bit older, but I assure you, when I first bought them, it was fairly rigid, and I couldn't bend it like that. Versus my nice Wolf and Shepherd bends a little bit easier. I just broke that thing.
You're really cranking on
Yeah, but those are the big keys that we generally recommend when someone is getting shoes. Another thing is, when it's flat on the ground, it shouldn't be tipped one direction or the other, because sometimes that can increase abnormal loading through the foot.
And if that happens after miles and miles of running on it, it's time to get a new shoe. You don't want to just keep on having more and more progression of that. So if you lose foam on one side of the shoe, lose rubber, you don't want to keep losing rubber and foam on that side, because it is going to throw your gait off even more and more. It's progressively getting more turn or torque into ankles, into shins, and feet. So look at that. Those wear patterns aren't just because aren't just something to gauge where your strike pattern is. It actually tells you when you need to get rid of that shoe, because you've worn out that ability to kind of stay stacked in some of those foot patterns and striking patterns.
Yeah. And then just getting a brand new shoe, again, back to taking the time to adjust to it. You don't just want to go 10 miles in your brand new shoes, even if they do hit all the specifics. So progressing into the wearing time, crucial.
Get some serious blisters if you do that. Mm-hmm. And lastly, we're going to look at self-care. So self-care, we want to be able to maintain our range of motion as much as we can. Sometimes as we start to run more, we start to lose certain ranges of motion, but as we progress through that, we try to maintain as much as we can. So ankle ranges of motion, we go through what's called a controlled articular rotation, or a CAR. It's basically going through its maximum range of motion. Say this is someone's ankle and you're going through that big circle. If you start to see that be harder, more difficult, to feel stiff, achy, try to maintain that as much as you can. Get through more mobility drills at the ankle. Zach talked a little bit about the toe box. Keeping a wide, the ability to get your toes wide is also really important. So after you've ran, I think it's a really good time to spread those toes back out if they've been jammed into a shoe. I actually had a patient earlier this week called shoes foot prisons. So if you have a foot prison and your toes are getting smashed into these foot prisons, make sure that you have the ability to kind of mobilize those afterwards. Get your toes to spread, wiggle each, try to get individual movement on each of those toes.
Let the toes out in the yard, you might say.
Let the toes out in the yard. What else could we optimize for self-care?
The recovery process, the other end of it. So obviously you want to have a good warm-up to get things primed and ready to move, but at the end you want to be hydrated, you want to refuel. Nice simple carbs right after the fact, but staying hydrated throughout the day, especially as you increase your overall activity levels. Getting good sleep, crucial. That's when the body recovers and repairs itself. So the exercise, the running is breaking things down. You want to have good sleep in order to rebuild back up and be stronger than you were before.
And to piggyback on what you said regarding warm-up, there's 3 keys that are research proven that can maximize your warm-up. The first is to have an aerobic component, so make sure you get your heart rate up a little bit. It might not be with running specifically, but if it is, you can use strides or even jumping jacks and calisthenics. The other thing would be to stretch specific muscles that are important when it comes to running, so making sure you're doing mobilization drills for ankles, knees, hips. Dr. Booth talked about some of the cars and things like that. All of that is great. And then the last thing would be to warm up in a manner that is specific to the task at hand. So if you got a day where you are doing more speed work, you probably want to do a build up into progressively going faster. You don't want to just jog around and then all of a sudden, boom, go as fast as you can be. You want to slow cook the brisket, bring it up to speed, right?
Get sweating.
We want to be braising that bad boy,
Get
and
sweating.
then you'll probably be in business.
Cool. Again, if you guys have any questions, reach out to us. These are kind of our quick hitters for making sure that you don't experience shin splints if you're trying to get back into a running program. And if you do, we're always here to help and try to get you out of those pain situations. Call us at 702.
558-2151.
Oh, it would have been 702 558.
You know what?
We'll see you guys.
We gotta do it again.